Hi guys, welcome back to In Case of Econ Struggles. Welcome to another AP Micro Struggle. Today we're talking about topic 5.2, which is shifting the labor market. It's going to be a super quick video. We're just going to talk about this graphically. Let's get right into it. So first, let's talk about the wage equilibrium or the labor market equilibrium in general. So again, we have a downward sloping labor demand curve because the firm is hiring workers, they're demanding workers, and these are the people who are lining up to work at a given firm or the labor supply curve. And if you pay the workers a higher wage, you're going to have more workers, which means the supply curve is going to be sloping up. And if you have to pay a higher wage, the firm wants to hire less people, which is why the demand curve is sloping downward, because as I pay a higher wage, I want to pay less people. So what we did before in that last video is we saw that we had an equilibrium right here where the supply and demand meet. That's nothing new, and that's going to be generally true for this topic. All we're doing is shifting supply and demand, and we're finding the new equilibrium wage, and the new equilibrium amount of employment, or L star. So what's going to happen? Let's say maybe the output price goes up, maybe technology goes up, or maybe productivity goes up. All three of these things are going to affect the price or the marginal product of labor. We've talked about the marginal product of labor before. All the marginal product of labor is how much more stuff I can make when I hire an additional worker. And we said before that the labor demand curve is basically price times the marginal product of labor. That's what I want to pay my workers. So if I make any of these two things go up, then I'm going to shift demand up. So what's going to happen? We're going to shift demand to the right, and we're going to keep supply the same. So we're just going to follow along the supply curve to where the supply curve meets the new demand curve. And notice that we're going to have a higher wage, and we are going to have a higher amount of workers, or L star. This makes sense. If I demand more workers, I'm probably going to have to pay them a higher wage in order to get more workers, and I am also going to have more workers if I want more workers. So this makes a lot of sense. Let's just draw it together where we shift demand to the left instead of shifting demand to the right. So here we're starting with that basic supply and demand diagram, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, where supply and demand meet, that is going to be our equilibrium in the market where we start. So this is L star when we start off, and way over here is going to be W star. And now maybe productivity falls, or the output price falls, or technology is not as good. We're going to shift demand to the left. So remember, when we shift to the left, for any of these points on the demand curve that I've drawn here in pink, we are going to want less workers at that wage price. So we're going to shift it to the left, and it's going to be a parallel line, and I'm going to do that as well as possible. That's about right. Here's a parallel line. Just shift it to the left, and I'm going to call that D1, which is our new demand curve. We're going to find where the new demand curve intersects the old supply curve, which is right here. And then again, if we go over to the y-axis, this is our new wage, so this is maybe W star 1. And if we go down to the x-axis, this is going to be L star 1. So when our demand goes down, we have a lower quote-unquote price, we're paying a lower wage, and we have a lower quantity, which is represented by a lower L star. Again, nothing new here. The only thing you need to keep in mind is when this demand curve shifts. That's again, the price is changing, the technology is changing, or the productivity is changing. Those are all things that shift the demand curve. They do not shift the supply curve. But now let's talk about things that actually do shift the supply curve but don't affect demand. So here's an example of shifting the labor supply curve. We have a lot more workers who enter this area and they want a job. So again, we've started right here at our normal equilibrium that we just saw, but now we're shifting supply curve to the right because at every wage level we have more workers who want to work at that wage level, so supply is shifting out or to the right. And again, we're just going to find where labor demand equals our new labor supply curve, which is going to be right here. Notice we're going to have more workers, our quantity is going to shift out, and we're going to be able to pay a lower wage because we have more people who are willing to work for a given amount of wage. And this is similar to in a regular market when you shift out the supply, price goes down and quantity goes up. It's the same thing here, but now we're talking about wage and number of workers instead of price and quantity of a good. And just for completeness, we'll go ahead and do a similar example where we shift the supply curve back, just to make sure we're all on the same page and we understand how this works. I'm not even going to label these axes. This is the equilibrium point right here. Maybe a bunch of people leave the market. Maybe a bunch of people move somewhere else, and you have a lot less people who are in the labor supply. So you're going to shift the labor supply again to the left. At a given wage, you have less people who are willing to work for that wage, so your supply curve shifts to the left. So this is our new supply curve. I'll just call it S1. And again, if our supply goes down, as you might expect just from normal supply and demand, our price is going to go up and our quantity is going to go down. And that's exactly what happens. So here's our new wage, so I'll call this W star 1. And here's our new labor, or L star 1. And that's our new equilibrium in the market. So maybe just to rehash, what factors change demand versus supply? If it shifts demand, it's going to be something like the output price. So I'll make sure I call this output price. It could also be technology. It could be productivity. So anything you see on a question or homework that says, oh, productivity goes up, the output price goes up, or technology goes up or down, those are things that shift the demand curve but don't shift the supply curve. If you see something like immigration, so a bunch of people are moving into or out of an area, that's going to shift the supply curve. If you see something like retirement, or maybe something like the age of work, where you're adjusting how many people are able to work or looking for a job, anything that shifts those sorts of metrics is going to shift the supply curve but not the demand curve. And I think this table is really helpful, even though it's maybe not nicely written. So if this is helpful, or these videos in general are helping you out, please like and subscribe. If you're confused, leave a comment below. And hopefully we'll see you next time for another case of econ struggles.